In this video, we'll tackle what's perhaps the most important and most interesting area of the city, the downtown. This will be a compact and dense location with high-rise buildings and an important hub for the city. Traffic is sure to be more complicated here than in other areas, so it's important to plan the road layout before building, as well as the public transport system. I actually spent a lot of time sketching and drawing several layouts until I reached a solution that I thought was adequate. The layout would have to be both traffic efficient and aesthetically pleasing and interesting, fitting the theme of the city. After deciding on what I wanted, I could then start building. I start by building a basic grid, which will serve as the core structure of the layout, which we will use as a guideline to make sure that all roads are distanced equally from one another. I don't usually flatten the terrain like what I've done here, but because this is the downtown area of a themed city, and because the area is already relatively flat with no expressive elevations, I did this to remove terrain imperfections and to give it a cleaner look. The roads are spaced at 120 meters, which is the grid that I've been using for the entire city. I removed the trees for visibility purposes so I could see what I was doing clearly. Most of the area will be filled with buildings and custom tree patterns, so it doesn't matter in the long term. After building the grid, I could then start building the layout that I have envisioned. I googled for ideas on several geometric patterns and shapes to see if I could find something that I could use as inspiration for this, and eventually I designed an octagonal pattern, which is the same shape that I've used on the coal and ore mining site. Octagons are actually the most adequate shape here because the roads angle at 135 degrees, which perfectly fits the grid of this particular city. This layout was first designed on paper and built on a backup save before I started recording, so I know exactly where each road should go in this grid, where everything looks the same at this point. When I'm done, I just have to delete the guiding roads, and the core structure of the layout is revealed, like magic. Every road looks the same though, so we need to add some road hierarchy to make it somewhat realistic, and especially because this will be a traffic-heavy zone. I used a large 6-lane road for the main collectors, which are the roads that cars will take to circulate around the downtown. These will also serve as the main access points, connecting to the highway. I then use a smaller, medium 4-lane road as an intermediate between the collector and the street, on paths that I predict the traffic AI will use the most, but not as much as the collector. So, to recap what I've done so far, I started by building a basic grid that would define the structure of the layout. Notice how I didn't touch the top left area to preserve the natural mountain. I then shaped the layout the way I wanted it to look, using the existing grid as a guide. I deleted the guides when I didn't need them anymore, and finally I added some road hierarchy by complementing the 2-lane streets with 4-lane and 6-lane collectors. Now, because this area is going to be the central hub for the city, for commerce and business, I want to give it a direct highway connection. I'm thinking we can make an extension of the existing highway nearby and cross the layout diagonally from one corner to the other and then connect both ends to the layout. The area in the middle can be a tunnel. Additionally, we can make a third highway connection to the left side, where the two regional highways intersect one another and transform the existing 3-way intersection into a 4-way intersection. I seem to have a plan in my head, so let's put it to practice. I start with a crossing diagonal highway on the top left corner. Here, I make a set of roads that would then be used as guidelines to make sure that the double highway is nicely centered. For the tunnel, instead of having the highway go down at a sharp elevation angle, I figured the road itself could be set at the same height level throughout its entire length, which would mean it would have to be sunken relative to the roads in the downtown layout before reaching the point where it tunnels. To figure out the most adequate height level, I untunnel the highway in a way where the road is as horizontal as possible, which you can see by looking at the elevation change indicator when building a road. I adjusted the height level of the terrain until that indicator was close to 0 degrees. For the connection between the layout and the highway, I built something simple and direct. This may have to be adjusted later to something more traffic efficient, depending on the volume of traffic that we get here. Overall, I think I want to experience how traffic will look like in this area and then adjust the intersection if there's a need for it. So I don't spend too much time now developing a complex interchange that may never be actually necessary. I then replicated the same intersection on the opposing corner of the layout. This end of the highway is not going to be connected to anything for the time being, but eventually it will continue in this direction and make an external connection to the adjacent city that's on that side of the map, as well as provide access to a possible industrial site next to the sea on the far south, providing easy transport of goods and materials between both areas. The other end of the highway, however, needs to be connected to the regional highway. I don't want to connect it right next to the layout because there's a small natural mountain where the original road tunnels, which I want to preserve. So I make the connection a bit further, closer to the edge of the map. This allows not only to make a smooth ramp, where I bring the new highway to the same height level of the original highway, but also to have a bigger distance between the highway interchange and the first connection to the downtown, which is a good practice to manage traffic later on. I also reworked the original highway to make it parallel to the new roads, making it compliant with the city grid. I then move on to rebuild the highway and interchange that's closest to the city so that I can build a third and final access point. I'm thinking I might expand the downtown here past its original area, so I make the highway elevated to prevent future unwanted intersections. The interchange itself is pretty simple and straight to the point, where I connect the double highway at the top to the single highway on the bottom with on and off ramps, and then use the road adjustment tools to remove unwanted turns. I'm predicting I'll have to redo this interchange soon, because it involves the two main regional highways, so traffic will be quite heavy. The first downtown intersection is also very close, which can cause congestion to spread when traffic becomes high enough. So that's something I'll have to pay attention to as the city grows. I work on the rest of the regional highway that connects directly to the downtown hub, and make it angle when it gets close to the base of the mountain. Still not sure what I'll be building here. I then rebuilt the tunnel to make it angle at 135 degrees, just like the rest of the layout, so that everything looks in tune. I then move on to the intersection between the highway and the Midtown connector, and that's going to be the last highway intersection of this video before moving on to the public transport network, I promise. Just like the other intersections, I make it simple. This one has the arterial overpassing the highway when crossing to the other side. Now, for the public transport network, I wanted to include this in the plans for the road layout because some networks require their own dedicated infrastructure, which takes a great amount of space. I'm speaking specifically about trains and, to some extent, trams. So those are the public transport networks I'm developing and including in the layout right now. I will probably want to include a metro system as well in the future, but because it runs mostly underground and its stations are small in size, it does not interfere with the road layout above, so there's no need to think about it at this point. Starting with the train system, I built a passenger train station at the bottom of the downtown at a central location. This station has 3 rails, so I'm thinking I can use the furthest one at the back as a pass-through, and for international lines as well, and the 2 rails at the front for local city lines. I connect these far away from the station to give enough space for trains to back up. In fact, these might even be overkill and the 3 rails don't need to be this long, but I think I'll be running this setup at start and modify it as necessary, depending on how train traffic behaves. Because the train station is slightly sunken from the rest of the layout, I can make the rails go underneath the main roads to avoid intersections. I use a terraform trick to make these fake quays so that the roads above have this fence at the edge and a concrete base instead of the sloped terrain. I did have to redo some of the areas where the road didn't come totally horizontal, but in the end I got the job done. I make a roundabout-like shape at the entrance of the station temporarily. In the future I can rework this into a public transport hub with a bus station and incorporating trams and metro as well. I finished the train system by connecting to the regional rail, as well as the cargo terminal that I placed on the last video. Finally, I do the tram network. The system itself is pretty simple. I modify the existing roads to incorporate tram tracks, and build exclusive rails whenever necessary to make the routes more direct, and also to connect to several points in the city. It's a bit confusing to make it out now, but I'll show you the complete infrastructure in a moment. This is a basic structure of the city's future downtown hub.